Welcome to Post Whatever with Ken Nishikawa. Today I will be demystifying two Japanese food items that are widely misunderstood overseas: Tamari soy sauce and Silken tofu. The last episode may have been too politically charged, since the most popular episode of this show so far has been vegetarian life in Tokyo. From a marketing perspective, I thought it would be a wise move to return to the subject of, yes, gastronomy. When I watch Western chefs, especially British so-called celebrity chefs, cook anything described as Japanese or Japanese-inspired, I noticed a consistent pattern. They reach for silken tofu over cotton tofu. They insist on tamari over regular Kikkoman table soy sauce. I'm guessing the reason is less about actual flavor, but the silk is more prestigious fabric than cotton. Therefore, silken tofu must be superior. And that tamari, being thicker and darker and of course more expensive, must simply be a premium upgrade. Soy sauce plus, the pro model if you like. The truth is way more nuanced than that, I'm afraid, and can be summarized thusly. Horses for courses. The right tool for the right job. What most of the world calls soy sauce has a specific name in Japan: koikuchi shoyu, literally thick soy sauce. It accounts for roughly 80% of all soy sauce sold in Japan. Kikkoman famously makes it, along with hundreds of independent producers across the country. And amongst these hundreds of producers, the oldest soy sauce company in the world is Muroi Shoyu, based in Fukui Prefecture, established in 1573, the Elizabethan era, a fact that put Kikkoman, whose founding families began brewing around 1650 and who formally incorporated as a company only in 1917, firmly in the position of energetic newcomer. In soy sauce terms, 1650 is basically last Tuesday. Koikuchi is the default setting of Japanese flavor. It's almost as basic as salt and pepper in Western cuisine. It's made from roughly equal parts soybean and wheat, fermented with a sharp taste. It is the condiment equivalent of a reliable colleague. Omnipresent, dependable, and unlikely to be the subject of a podcast episode. Tamari, however, is something else entirely. Tamari is the oldest form of Japanese soy sauce. It predates koikuchi by several centuries. Its name comes from the Japanese verb tamaru, meaning to accumulate, as water accumulates in ponds, and there is a good reason behind it. Here's what actually happened. In the production of miso, a dark liquid pools at the bottom of the fermentation vessel. This, incidentally, is precisely the same principle behind Marmite, which is made from the yeast byproduct of beer brewing. The surplus that brewers used to simply discard until someone was brave enough to taste it and had a revelation. This pooled dark liquid, tamari, is quite literally where Japanese soy sauce comes from. A medieval Japanese monk looked at the runoff from his miso batch. Again, he was brave enough to taste it and thought, this is too good to throw away. That's what I call a moment of eureka, or satori. The key distinction compositionally is wheat, or rather, its absence, where koikuchi standard soy sauce use soy and wheat in roughly equal measure. Tamari is made almost entirely from soybeans, with little or no wheat at all, depending on how the miso is made in the first place. This means it is, in most cases, gluten-free. The result is a sauce that is thicker, darker, and dramatically more intense. Now, and this is the part that British television chefs have singularly failed to communicate. Tamari is not universally superior to standard soy sauce. It is specifically superior for specific things. Save for around Nagoya, where tamari production is concentrated, most people in Japan do not keep tamari at home. I don't, and my mum doesn't either. This is not because they're expensive and we can't afford it, but rather it is because you don't need it for everyday cooking. So, when do you actually use tamari? Tamari is ideal for raw seafood. Sushi, sashimi, where its thick, rich, intensely savory body stands up to oily fish without being overwhelmed. When heated, it produces a beautiful reddish glaze, which makes it essential for teriyaki and for simmered fish dishes, where you want that lacquered, sticky finish. It holds its flavor at high temperature rather than burning off. For everything else, and by everything else I mean the vast majority of Japanese cooking, koikuchi, the standard soy sauce, is your instrument. Vegetable stir-fries, for example, where you want a quick splash of savor without weight. Like dashi broth, ramen broth, udon broth, soba broth, etc., etc., etc. I'm beginning to realize I'm in danger of sounding like Uncle Roger at this point. Anyway, the truth is, majority of people in Tokyo tend to use the standard kikkoman, or whatever is your choice of standard soy sauce for everything. That is not to say that you cannot use tamari for anything else. In fact, one could say they are almost interchangeable. There are no strict rules really, unless you work for a really high-end Japanese restaurant, and then they might specify, like I did, use tamari for this. What irks me is the way some celebrity chefs insist you use tamari when there is no need. In Japan, tofu is also divided into two principal categories: momen, which means cotton, and kinu, which means silk. Now, the names. Many people entirely reasonably assume that cotton and silk refer to the fabrics used to strain the soy milk. I used to believe that when I was a child. They are half right. Well, we are half right. Momen tofu is called cotton tofu because a cotton cloth is used in production. The tofu is pressed against it, leaving a faintly rough textile-like imprint on the surface. Logical, consistent, good. Kinu tofu, however, the silky variety, does not involve silk at all. The name is purely a reference to the texture. The silk is entirely metaphorical, which means you have one tofu named after what touches it and another named after what it feels like. Silken tofu is delicate, soft, smooth, almost custard-like, and, above all, silky. Actually, cotton tofu has an extra step to produce, pressing to remove extra moisture. The result is something firmer, denser. You can really taste the soybean, in fact, and structurally far more willing to cooperate with a spatula or chopsticks. So, the question, I suppose, is, what do you actually do with each of them? Kinu, silken tofu, is best eaten as is. Its definitive presentation is hiyayakko, chilled silken tofu with grated ginger, spring onion, and splash of soy sauce over the top. Tofu sashimi if you like. Sprinkling some bonito flakes is a common practice. It requires no cooking, no preparation beyond the act of not dropping it, which sounds trivial until you have actually tried to lift silken tofu with chopsticks. At which point you will understand why Japanese table manners do not include the phrase casual. What silken tofu is not suited for, with one exception I'll come to in a moment, is heat. Any attempt to stir-fry it will produce something resembling warm, pale rubble. It just disintegrates. It collapses. It offers no resistance whatsoever. I have watched Western chefs do this on live TV. Catastrophe. The exception is deep frying. It works precisely because the hot oil creates a shell around the tofu before it has the chance to fall apart. On the other hand, momen, cotton tofu, retains its shape under heat. which makes it the correct choice for stir fries and grilling. Although in Japan you can obtain a pre-deep fried tofu called atsuage or namage depending on the area. So I would sooner go for this actually rather than deep frying tofu by myself. But these deep fried tofu are not as common in the West, I suppose. So if you want to have deep fried tofu, you have to deep fry it. But if you do want tofu steak or use tofu in your stir-fried dish, cotton is what you want. In fact, you could press it further under the weight or wrap it in a kitchen towel for an hour or so, or stick it in the microwave to remove additional moisture, which improves its ability to hold. A brief note on regional variation. In Okinawa, there is a local variety called shima tofu, island tofu, which is firmer still than standard cotton variety. If you have ever struggled to pick up tofu with chopsticks, Okinawa shima tofu is your friend. It is most certainly my friend. So, the next time a famous celebrity chef insists on using tamari for your ramen broth or silken tofu for your stir-fry, you are now equipped to raise an eyebrow. And the moral of today's episode is simple. Know your tofu, know your shoyu. This has been Post Whatever. If you found any of that remotely useful or at least mildly diverting, do consider liking and or subscribing. And before I go, a food-related anecdote. In Japan, there's a meal kit for children called okosama lunch, meaning quite literally lunch for children or lunch set for children. It is served with a ubiquitous little Japanese flag stuck into the ketchup-flavored rice, which is shaped like Mount Fuji. Charming and, dare I say, patriotic. Now, I don't know if you've been following the news, but the Japanese government is currently very keen to introduce legislation criminalizing the public vandalism of the national flag. The ruling party, LDP's project team, met last week to approve the outline of the proposed law. And in this meeting, they had to formally address a pressing constitutional question. What about the little paper flags on the kids' lunch? After due deliberation, they concluded that decorative flags used in children's meals would be excluded from the legislation's scope. So, you may not publicly defile the Hinomaru, the flag, but if it is attached to a toothpick and inserted into a small mountain of ketchup rice, you may do with it as you wish. When I was a child, I used to play with and inevitably destroy these highly respectable miniature national emblems at restaurants, which are public spaces by definition. So here I am, very relieved to learn that I will not be retroactively prosecuted. I'm Ken Nishikawa. Until next time, remember, government is always right.